With all the stories making the headlines now this Thursday lunchtime, it's the ITV News.
Nazanin's return, a family reunited. This image described as happiness in one pic. The 6-year wait for a family hug is over for her husband Richard and 7-year-old Gabriella. Also ahead, casualties unknown after a theatre housing around 1,000 people is attacked in Ukraine. Here, going up, interest rates to try to bring inflation down. And a shock on the seas. ITV News understands P&O Ferries has made all sailing staff redundant.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. While you were sleeping, a 7-year-old girl was reunited with the mother she hasn't seen in years. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's daughter Gabriella said, "Is that mummy?" as Nazanin emerged from a plane in Oxfordshire in the early hours. Later, a group hug for the family of 3 separated for 6 long years after Nazanin was detained in Iran. A picture of pure joy, a story of hope. Now their new life back in the UK begins. Here's Faye Barker.
In the early hours of this morning, they were home. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe back on British soil, Anousheh Ashuri just behind her. Their families watching through a window.
Mummy!
That's Mummy.
For most of 7-year-old Gabriella's life, she's not been able to run to or hug her mother. Families finally back together after the UK government settled a complicated £400 million debt with Iran.
It's been a really difficult 48 hours. The expectation that they would be released, but we weren't sure and right until the last minute. So it's been very emotional, but also a really happy moment for the families.
Nazanin's husband Richard has campaigned tirelessly for nearly 6 years since his wife was detained on spying charges she's always denied. Their daughter Gabriella is finally with both her parents.
Last night, I just heard from Richard that she slept in the bed with them in between them all last night. So I think that's a really special moment for all 3 of them, actually. We struggled to believe she was coming home until we saw her on that flight. So that first photo of her on the flight, finally taking off, I think that's when it first started to sink in. She might be coming home. We might get our girl back again.
For this family, now it's a time to simply be together after so many years forced apart. Faye Barker, ITV News.
The world is waiting to find out how many people survived, how many were killed when a theatre was attacked in Ukraine that was acting as a makeshift shelter for more than 1,000 people. The word children written in Russian clearly visible from the sky to alert Russian forces that Ukrainians' youngest were inside. With the latest, here's Martin Stew.
This smouldering rubble was once a theatre. Ukraine has accused Russian forces of bombing the building in Mariupol, which was being used as a shelter. This is how it looked a few days ago. The white writing says children in Russian. It's believed 1,000 people were inside the basement, which luckily withstood the worst of the attack. The building is destroyed, said President Zelensky. The number of victims is unknown yet. My heart is broken because of what Russia does to our people. 300,000 are still trapped within the besieged city of Mariupol. Cut off from water and power, with supplies running out. With the Russian army releasing images they claim show reinforcements are on their way, Western politicians are adamant international law must be followed.
The targeting of civilians or civilian infrastructure is against international humanitarian law and the law of armed conflict. We will make sure that those who are responsible at whatever level are held to account.
Joe Biden placing that blame firmly on Vladimir Putin.
I think he is a war criminal.
The Kremlin has condemned those comments. Their foreign minister schmoozing Emirati leaders this morning after saying yesterday peace talks were making progress. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, which emerged from a 35-hour curfew this morning, at least one person died after debris from a downed missile hit an apartment block. The war may not be going to plan for the Russians, but it's Ukrainians who are paying the terrible price. Martin Stew, ITV News.
Back here, interest rates have gone up in the last half an hour. The Bank of England has announced the rate has risen from 0.5% to 0.75% to try to bring inflation down. Let's get reaction from our economics editor, Joel Hills. Joel, tell us more, please.
Well, the Bank of England's moving to contain rising prices, which are absolutely rampant at the moment. The outlook for inflation looked pretty bleak even before Russia invaded the Ukraine. The situation has darkened considerably in the last 3 weeks. We've got a situation where Russian tanks are rolling across the breadbasket of Europe, and where we're seeing Western countries, the UK, Europe, the United States, attempting to wean themselves off Russian oil and gas. Supply chains already stretched by COVID-19 now find themselves stretched yet further. We've got parts of the Black Sea which are no-go areas. We've got sanctions which are disrupting trade. Energy prices, food prices are being forced higher. Now, by raising interest rates, the Bank of England isn't seeking to influence the price of petrol or diesel at the pump, or indeed the food or in the supermarkets. What it's hoping to do is to avoid inflation expectations becoming what it would call de-anchored. Specifically, its concern is that people will respond to this massive squeeze on their living standards by asking for very substantial pay rises, which will be paid for by companies putting up their prices, which will lead to yet further demands for higher pay. At the moment, the bank thinks that it has the situation under control, but obviously we are in a situation currently where growth is slowing, where inflation is high and rising, where taxes are rising, and where interest rates are rising. Bank rates expected to hit 2% by the end of this year. The next few months, I'm afraid, are going to be really grim.
Joel, thank you very much. Thank you. In breaking news this lunchtime, ITV News has been told P&O Ferries is making all its sailing staff redundant. The development follows an announcement this morning that today's crossings were all suspended, with all passengers and cargo taken off the company's vessels. Shihab Khan has the details. What can you tell us?
So what we were told was that everything had paused for P&O Ferries until they made a company announcement, but we understand that sailing staff have been informed that they're going to be made redundant. Instead, agency staff will be used to keep services going, and those sailing staff will be able to apply to that agency if they wish to continue working. Ultimately, this is for a number of reasons. Firstly, because of the pandemic and the fact that there was reduced demand, and because of Brexit. There were less crossings taking place for trade during the transition period. Now, RMT, the union that represents a number of those sailing staff, have told their staff to stay on board. They are urging the government and the Transport Secretary to intervene. Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, has said that he's having urgent discussions with P&O Ferries and that he is concerned by this, and his officials are doing work to determine what happens next. It is that company announcement that they said that they were going to have that we're waiting for, and that will ultimately provide us with an update of what the future holds. But as of this lunchtime, those sailing staff have been told that they've been made redundant, and this is a developing situation, so we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. Shihab Khan, thank you very much for that update. Thank you. And in more breaking news this lunchtime, the BBC says it has paid Diana, Princess of Wales's private secretary, a substantial sum in damages. The corporation says it has also apologised unreservedly to Commander Patrick Jeffson over the way Martin Bashir obtained his infamous 1995 Panorama interview with Diana. We'll get more on that developing story online. Finally, we started on one reunion, we end on another. Last week, we reported on a young Ukrainian boy who arrived in Slovakia alone among the thousands of refugees fleeing the violence. 11-year-old Hossain was sent to safety by his mother, who had to stay and care for her mother. She wrote her number on his hand and hoped he would be cared for by strangers. Of course, we now know he was. Well, now he has been reunited with his mother, Julia, and grandmother in Slovakia after they were helped to make a very difficult train journey out of the country. Julia said the family will have to start from scratch. We lost everything we've had, but we are healthy. Another fabulous picture. Mary's here at 6:30. Bye-bye.